The sound of hooves splashing through water echoed through the valley like music. I leaned back on the railing of my porch, the scent of sweet alfalfa and sun-warmed pine rising in the breeze, watching my horses wade into the pond behind my ranch house. Sunlight danced across the rippling surface, catching on their slick coats like liquid gold. To me, this was paradise, pure, unfiltered peace, until the screaming started. Hey, hey, what do you think you're doing? A shrill voice pierced the quiet like a cattle prod to the brain. I turned slowly, already bracing myself. And there she was, standing like a lighthouse of entitlement at the property line, decked out in designer sunglasses, a sleeveless floral dress too bright for comfort, and a kind of perfectly polished rage only an HOA board member could maintain without cracking. Her name was Claire Bennett, though everyone in the neighborhood had taken to calling her Karen behind closed doors, even her husband, if the rumors were true. I didn't answer her right away, partly because I was stunned, partly because I didn't want to encourage her with acknowledgement, but she wasn't the type to need much encouragement. Are those horses in the water? That's a community pond. That's for people, she barked, pointing an accusatory French-tipped finger toward the edge of the pond like it had personally offended her. I sighed and set down my mug of coffee, letting my boots clomp down the porch steps. It's not a community pond. It's on my land. And yeah, they're horses. They live here. Karen blinked, like I'd told her the moon was made of cheese. Then she stepped forward, her heels sinking slightly into the soft grass. Don't play games. This whole section is within the HOA water district. My husband and I paid for a shared water feature when we bought the lot. I walked over the fence line and rested my hands on the top rail. Ma'am, your property ends at that little white stake behind you. This pond is completely on my parcel. The horses are swimming on private property. There's no HOA jurisdiction here. She laughed. One of those sharp, dry, fake laughs you hear from someone who's already planning their next 3 threats. Oh, really? Well, I don't care what paperwork you think you have. Letting livestock in a body of water next to an HOA neighborhood? That's an environmental hazard. You're contaminating shared airspace. I'm sorry, what? I almost choked. Did you just say airspace? Don't get cute with me, she hissed. I'm calling the police. My jaw tightened, but I didn't move. I wasn't about to back down. Go ahead. I'll be on the porch. She didn't hesitate. She whipped out her phone with the precision of a Wild West gunslinger and started dialing, pacing in angry circles near the property marker while snapping photos of the horses in the pond. I could hear her side of the conversation. Every exaggerated accusation. Yes, officer, there are multiple large animals contaminating a residential waterway. No, I don't know if they've been vaccinated for waterborne disease. I pay HOA dues, and this is affecting property values. I stepped back and sat down, stroking my dog's head as she watched the spectacle with more dignity than I was capable of mustering in that moment. I wasn't nervous. I'd already had the land surveyed when I bought it 6 months ago. Every inch of that pond was mine. Still, watching her pacing like a territorial goose gave me that sinking feeling you get when someone crashes your picnic with a megaphone and a clipboard. 10 minutes later, the familiar rumble of tires on gravel made its way up the hill. A sheriff's SUV pulled into my long driveway, followed by a cloud of dust and a very tired-looking deputy, the kind who'd probably dealt with Karen before. I met him halfway, tipping my hat. Afternoon, officer. Beautiful day, isn't it? He gave me a long, assessing look. We got a call about livestock in a public body of water. I nodded toward the pond. That'd be them, and that's my pond. Karen appeared behind the officer, like a conjured demon. Don't listen to him. He's lying. That water is clearly visible from 3 of our yards. It must be shared. There's a covenant in our HOA bylaws. Ma'am, the officer interrupted, holding up his hand. Does he live within the HOA boundaries? She faltered. Technically, he lives next to them, but the properties are connected, so jurisdiction. No HOA signs posted on his land, no easement records, no shared ownership, the officer muttered. flipping open a small notepad and scribbling. That pond is on his deed. It's private property. Karen turned scarlet. So you're just going to let him poison the water? My nephew might want to fish there. The officer raised an eyebrow. Does your nephew fish in privately owned ponds? He might if he wanted to. The deputy gave me a look. One of those, I'm sorry you live next to this kind of looks. Then he nodded toward the horses. They seem happy. Cool off spot, I said. Heat's rough this time of year. He turned to leave. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't done. So you're not going to issue a fine? You're not going to investigate? He has animals in a recreational zone. It's not a recreational zone, ma'am, the officer said, already climbing into the SUV. It's a pond, on a ranch, where horses live. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her rage so thick she couldn't even form words. She stomped back toward her property line and stood there, hands on hips, eyes blazing. I watched her for a moment, then turned my attention back to the horses. They were frolicking, snorting, rolling in the shallow water like kids at summer camp. My dog barked once, as if laughing. I exhaled slowly and picked up my coffee again, the mug warm in my hands. But something gnawed at me. She wasn't going to stop. She wasn't the kind of person who could accept being told no, especially not in front of a police officer. She'd tasted humiliation, and people like her didn't let that go. They let it fester. I stared across the field at her as she glared from behind her perfectly manicured hedges, dialing on her phone again. She was planning something, and if she thought a little splash in my pond was bad, she hadn't seen what a real storm looked like. 3 days passed without a word from Karen, but the silence was far more ominous than her yelling. I knew better than to think it was over. People like her didn't back off. They recalibrated. They waited for you to breathe easy before striking again. So, when the envelope arrived taped to my gate post in a cheap plastic sleeve like some kind of legal exorcism, I wasn't surprised. I peeled it open, expecting another tantrum. Inside was a printed notice of violation from the HOA. Not a real legal document, just an official-looking letterhead, a bulleted list of supposed infractions, and a threat of additional fines and consequences. It cited noise, environmental endangerment, and unauthorized aquatic livestock activity. That last one made me laugh, briefly, but what really got under my skin wasn't the absurdity of the claims. It was that Karen was dragging the entire HOA into it now. She wasn't content to fight this battle alone. She wanted the weight of bureaucracy behind her tantrum. I drove down to the HOA office that afternoon. It was in one of those sterile little community buildings that smelled like toner and fake lemon cleaner. Behind a glass window, a woman in a beige cardigan with a nameplate that read Paula looked up at me with cautious optimism. "Hi, I think there's been a mistake," I said, handing her the letter. She read it, her brows slowly knitting. "You're Mr. Hale, right? You're on Saddlebrook Ranch." "That's right. You're not even part of this HOA." Her voice dropped, as if she were ashamed on behalf of the paper in her hand. This shouldn't have been sent to you at all. You're just adjacent to our neighborhood." I nodded. That's what I figured. But someone's got an agenda. She hesitated. "Was it, Claire?" There it was, confirmation. She didn't even try to pretend. I could see it in her face. Karen had done this before. She's got everyone walking on eggshells, Paula said in a hushed tone. She pushes the board to send notices, files complaints, uses her husband's legal connections to intimidate people. Most folks just cave. I'm not most folks. Paula gave me a sympathetic smile. Then I'd recommend keeping records. Dates, photos, anything, because she won't stop. She was right. Within a week, things escalated. Karen started patrolling the fence line with a clipboard and phone in hand, like she was documenting war crimes. Every time the horses went near the pond, she snapped photos. One evening, I caught her peering over the fence with binoculars. I installed trail cameras, high-resolution ones with infrared. And sure enough, 2 nights later, I caught her creeping 10 feet past the boundary line under cover of dusk, her flats sinking into mud as she tried to get evidence. Of what? I didn't know. Maybe illegal horse bathing. I sent the footage to my lawyer, who sent her a cease and desist. The response? A smug little social media post. Some people think they can't be touched just because they wear a hat and own some land. Faced with tears of joy, she thought this was funny. What wasn't funny was the HOA Facebook group lighting up the next day with a long, fear-mongering post from Karen herself. She claimed that my horses were polluting a delicate ecosystem, that runoff from my property was threatening community health, and that I was hostile to neighborhood concerns. She even hinted that I had intimidated her, because I asked her not to trespass. It was all manipulative garbage, but it was wrapped in enough flowery language and passive-aggressive undertones that a few nervous neighbors began to side with her. I was becoming the villain of her narrative. At first, I tried to clarify things. I posted my property deed, the pond survey maps, even photos of the horses with their vet certificates and the state's environmental testing report I'd proactively done. But logic doesn't win against hysteria, especially when hysteria is dressed in pastel and pearls and claims she's just worried about the children. Then came the petition. Someone slipped it into mailboxes around the neighborhood and signed, of course, calling for the HOA to seek formal environmental review of my property. It wasn't legal demand, just a scare tactic. But it worked. Suddenly, neighbors I'd barely spoken to were giving me strange looks, keeping their kids closer as they walked past my fence, whispering behind closed doors. That's when the second police call happened. This time, I wasn't even home. I'd driven into town for supplies and came back to find another deputy waiting by the pond. The horses were out, grazing quietly, water still glistening on their coats. "You Mr. Hale?" he asked as I stepped out of the truck. "Yeah. What's the issue this time?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Got a report about possible animal cruelty. Something about livestock being forced to swim in contaminated water." I stared at him, stunned. "You're kidding." He looked uncomfortable. "Look, I don't make the reports, but I do have to check. You mind if I take a quick look?" I waved him through. "Be my guest. They love it in there. I'd have to wrestle them to keep them out." He did a quick walk around, checked the barn, even petted one of the geldings. When he returned, he looked more irritated than concerned. "I'm going to write this up as unfounded, but I'd recommend keeping your nose clean, sir. You've clearly got someone with a grudge. She's trying to make my life hell. She's trying to build a case," he replied quietly. "Even if there's nothing to find, enough reports can make it seem like there is. Paperwork stacks up." After he left, I sat on the edge of the porch as twilight settled over the valley. My dog curled up at my feet. Crickets chirped. The sky turned to melted gold, and my horses stood calm and dripping near the pond, flicking their tails lazily. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It was war now, and not the kind fought with fists or fences, but with influence, persistence, and paperwork. Karen wasn't going to stop, and I was done waiting for her to come up with her next attack. It was time I started thinking like her. Not emotionally. Strategically. She thought she knew how to play the game, but she didn't know who she was playing with. I didn't sleep much after that second visit from the sheriff. Not because I was worried Karen's accusations had no legal weight, but because I finally understood her angle. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to wear me down, chip away at my peace, inch by inch, until the place I bought for freedom felt like a prison. That kind of warfare wasn't new to me. In another life, I'd worked with regulatory law for a large land management firm, where neighbor disputes over water lines, fencing, and usage rights were as common as dust storms. I'd watched entitled people like Karen wield rules like blunt instruments, banking on the idea that their targets wouldn't fight back. But I wasn't some docile retiree worried about property values. I knew how to dig deeper than she ever could, so I got to work. I started by pulling the full plat maps from the county records office. I went over every contour, every zoning line, every easement, and land split from the last 20 years. It didn't take long to find something interesting. Karen's house sat on the edge of a subdivision that had once been carved out of my ranch's original property line, long before I bought it. And according to the most recent topographic overlay, her backyard, complete with a stamped concrete patio and decorative koi pond, was actually built a few feet onto my land. Not a lot, about 9 feet, give or take. But 9 feet was enough. Enough to prove encroachment. Enough to give me leverage. The next step was simple. I called a friend, a boundary surveyor I'd worked with back in my old job. Within 48 hours, he was on site with high-tech gear and a drone. He marked off every inch of the disputed line with bright orange flags and GPS coordinates. We filed the updated survey with the county and included it with a legal notification sent to Karen and the HOA board. The letter was simple. Remove the encroaching patio structure or face legal action. I even gave her 30 days. Her response arrived in the form of a shrieking voicemail, left at 2 a.m. You smug, delusional lunatic. You think you can scare me? My husband's firm knows every judge in this county. That patio is legally established under grandfather rights. You don't know what you're talking about. We'll have you shut down before the week's out. She sounded more rattled than confident. I didn't return the call. Instead, I started preparing for the 4th of July. It was perfect timing. Every summer, local riders from surrounding counties held an informal holiday cookout, usually hosted by whoever had the most space. This year, I offered up my ranch. Word spread fast, and when I added that the horses could cool off in my pond, folks were more excited than ever. Karen must have noticed the uptick in activity. Trucks hauling trailers started arriving a few days early to help set up tents and grills. She could see them from her upstairs window, and I knew every bit of it made her skin crawl. Still, she didn't say a word. Not yet. The morning of the barbecue arrived with the smell of grilled brisket, fresh hay, and sunblock. The horses were lined up along the fence, tails flicking, nostrils flaring at the scent of smoked meat and excitement. Kids ran across the open field chasing each other with sparklers. Music echoed from portable speakers, and the pond sparkled like a diamond under the sun. Karen showed up around noon, not as a guest, not with an invitation. She stood at the property line again, but this time she had a clipboard in one hand and her phone already recording in the other. These animals are being abused. This is unsanitary. You can't have livestock so close to public gatherings, she shouted, clearly trying to be heard by the crowd. Some folks turned, confused. Most just ignored her. I calmly walked over and pointed to a large laminated board I'd mounted to a fence post. It displayed the property deed, complete with boundary lines, the county's confirmation of my pond ownership, and a bold title. Private property, legally permitted use. She took one look and scoffed. You really think this makes you untouchable? No, Karen, I said. I think it makes me patient. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. Also, I added, you might want to look into Section 412 of the HOA Charter. It prohibits board members from engaging in unapproved enforcement or trespassing on non-HOA parcels. Your little nightly recon missions? I've got them on trail cam. Her face froze. I continued, lowering my voice. You've been harassing me for weeks, filing false complaints, spreading lies online. And now, you've got a patio built on my land, which means, according to the county, you owe me rent. Or removal. Your choice. That's when she lost it. She hurled the clipboard to the ground and screamed, You won't get away with this. You think some cowboy with a field and a pond is going to take me down? I built this neighborhood. People listened to me. By now, a good portion of the party had noticed. Phones were up, recording. Neighbors she tried to manipulate were standing back, watching her unravel like a badly knitted sweater in a wind tunnel. She turned and stormed away, but not before tripping over one of the newly placed boundary flags. The entire field went quiet for a heartbeat. Then someone chuckled. It spread fast, like fire through dry grass. Later that evening, as fireworks bloomed over the hills and the pond shimmered in the colored bursts of light, I sat with a plate of ribs and a glass of sweet tea, my boots kicked up on the porch railing. One of my neighbors, a woman I'd barely spoken to before, walked over with a smile. That was something, she said. Yeah, I replied. Can't say I planned it that way, but I'm not mad about it. She's going to come for you even harder now, you know. I nodded. She can try. Because the truth was, this had never been about horses or ponds or HOA rules. It was about power, about control. And now that I'd taken it back, she couldn't stand it. But the thing Karen didn't know what she could never understand, was that the deeper the roots, the harder the tree is to shake. And my roots here weren't going anywhere. The days after the barbecue passed like the calm before a storm. Karen had gone unusually quiet. Her social media went dark. The HOA page slowed to a crawl, and her daily patrols stopped altogether. But I knew better than to think it was over. Silence from her meant only one thing. She was reloading. I spent those days buttoning everything up. Every flag, every record, every minute of trail cam footage. My lawyer compiled a neat little packet we submitted to the county and to the HOA's internal review board. I wasn't out to destroy her. I just wanted her to stop turning my life into a courtroom drama every time my horses took a dip. But people like Karen never quit unless someone made them. And I had every intention of doing just that. Then, about 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. This one came certified, delivered by a local courier who looked half apologetic just handing it over. It was from Karen's husband's firm, a sharply worded cease and desist. Ironically, it accused me of harassment, of unlawful public displays of sensitive property information, and of defamation via social media provocation. I read it once, twice, and then laughed until my dog came over to check if I was okay. They were trying to flip the narrative, make me the aggressor. But I'd already seen this strategy in corporate boardrooms. When you can't beat someone on facts, you shift the battlefield to confusion. You drown them in paperwork and noise. But this wasn't my first chess game. I already had the next move lined up. A formal boundary dispute hearing was scheduled by the HOA's review panel. After my legal filing regarding the patio encroachment was acknowledged as valid. Unlike the HOA's usual meetings, civil, quiet affairs with maybe 5 attendees. This one had a packed room. Word had spread about the barbecue, the property line, and most importantly, about Karen's meltdown. Neighbors came curious, some whispering, others openly filming. I walked in wearing boots, a buttoned shirt, and the calm of a man who brought receipts. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by her husband and a man who looked like he billed by the hour just to breathe. She looked different, less polished. Her makeup was too thick, her smile too forced. And yet, she carried herself like she still owned the place. The chairman of the board cleared his throat. Today's meeting addresses a formal property encroachment dispute between Claire Bennett and Mr. Hale regarding patio construction on a portion of Mr. Hale's surveyed land. Karen's lawyer stood up immediately. We dispute the legitimacy of this claim. Our client asserts that the patio in question was constructed under the previous understanding of the boundary, and therefore qualifies as a grandfathered structure. My attorney stood and calmly slid a folder onto the table. Inside were the survey records, GPS files, a deed, and photographic evidence. Not just of the encroachment, but of Karen trespassing to collect photos on my land without permission. Even a time-stamped video of her kicking one of the boundary flags and yelling obscenities. We're not here to punish. My attorney said clearly, we're here to correct. If the Bennetts wish to avoid litigation, the solution is simple. Move the structure, or purchase the land at fair market value, assuming the property owner is even willing to sell. Karen shot up from her seat, voice shaking. This is a sham. He's manipulating you all. He's been targeting me for months, turning the neighborhood against me. A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one nodded. One man outright rolled his eyes. The chairman raised a hand. Mrs. Bennett, please. We have a formal process. She snapped. You're all spineless. You let him bring livestock into a residential space, desecrate our view with farm trash, and now you're pretending he's a victim. Someone in the back muttered, You called the cops on a horse, Claire. Laughter rippled through the room. Karen's eyes darted wildly. Her composure, always paper-thin, shredded completely. She turned to her husband for backup, but he was busy staring down at his phone, as if already planning the drive home. The board ruled unanimously. The patio violated the property boundary and had to be removed within 60 days unless a settlement was reached. They also issued a warning to Karen for repeated abuse of authority, citing her attempts to levy unenforceable fines and the unauthorized surveillance of neighboring property. She stormed out without another word. I thought that would be the end of it, but Karen wasn't done. The very next morning, She showed up again at the fence line. No clipboard, no phone, just a tired face and a bitterness that seemed to seep into the ground. She didn't shout. She just stared at me while I fed the horses. "I hope it was worth it," she said quietly. "It wasn't about winning," I replied. "It was about getting my peace back." She huffed and turned away. The patio came down 2 weeks later. The sound of jackhammers and saws was oddly satisfying. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw enough to know she wasn't doing it gracefully. There was no apology, no note, no olive branch. Just silence and concrete dust. The neighborhood changed after that. People who used to keep their heads down started waving when they drove by. One neighbor brought over a pie. Another asked if she could bring her son to pet the horses. Karen stayed inside most days. When she did emerge, she kept her head low and her voice lower. Whatever power she thought she had evaporated the moment she tried to crush the wrong person. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Instead, I took a weekend and installed something new at the pond. It was a life-size sculpture of a horse rearing up, cast in bronze, with a fountain spout spraying a graceful arc of water from its mouth into the pond. A little over the top, maybe, but every time I looked at it, I smiled. It was art, it was defiance, and it was beautiful. The horses swam beneath it that evening, rippling water around its base like something out of a dream. As I sat on the porch with a cold drink, my dog at my side, and the stars blinking above the dark treetops, I let myself relax for the first time in months. They say horses don't care about human drama. But that night, I swear they knew. Because just as Karen stepped outside to glare across the way, one of my Maras turned, flicked her tail, and sent a mighty splash right across the fence line. I didn't laugh, but I didn't stop smiling either.